Welcome to Mindful Moments.
Yeah.
Nourish your mind on the go. This audio uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Ready to dive deep into Greek mythology? Not just any retelling. We're going through Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson's Greek gods, where we get to see the myths through the eyes of our favorite sarcastic demigod.
It's a brilliant way to make these ancient stories feel fresh and relevant. Percy's voice adds this layer of humor and modern sensibility that really pulls you in.
Totally. You're not just reading about Zeus throwing lightning bolts. You're getting Percy's hilarious commentary on the whole dysfunctional Olympian family drama. But before we get to Zeus and the gang, we have to start at the very beginning. The creation myth.
Even the origin story, as Percy tells it, is a wild ride. We start with chaos, this primordial void. Then comes Gaia, the earth, and her, shall we say, overbearing husband, Uranus. Percy definitely has some thoughts on that name.
Oh, yeah. Percy's take on Uranus' name is priceless. It's like, dude, you really couldn't think of a better name for the sky.
Yeah. But beyond the name, this is where the family drama kicks off. Uranus imprisons his own kids, the Titans and the Cyclops, in Tartarus.
It's a classic power struggle, right? A father threatened by his offspring. It sets this pattern of rebellion and betrayal that runs throughout the whole Olympian saga.
And that's where Kronos comes in, aided by Gaia. He takes his sides to Uranus. And Percy doesn't spare us any of the gory details. We get the blood, the ichor, even the birth of the Furies from that spilled divine blood.
It's a pivotal moment, establishing Kronos as this powerful, but also ruthless figure. And of course, we have the prophecy that Kronos will be overthrown by one of his own children. Talking about a self-fulfilling prophecy, his paranoia leads him to swallow his kids, trying to avoid his fate.
Except, of course, Zeus escapes. And that leads us to the epic showdown. The Titanomachy, the Olympians versus the Titans. And it's not just the Olympians fighting. They've got the Cyclops on their side, who forged these iconic weapons. Zeus's lightning bolt, Poseidon's trident, Hades' helm of darkness. These weapons really become extensions of the gods themselves, symbols of their power and their domains.
It's fascinating how the weapons become almost like characters themselves.
Yeah.
And after the Olympians win, we get this whole new dynamic. They've got Mount Olympus. They're the rulers of the cosmos. But let's be honest, they're still a pretty dysfunctional family.
Totally. You've got Hestia, the eldest, who chooses a more peaceful path, becoming the goddess of the hearth. It's like she's saying, I'm out of this drama.
And there's Demeter, whose story gets tied to the changing seasons because of Persephone's abduction by Hades.
Demeter's grief is so powerful that it literally affects the natural world. And then, of course, we can't forget Hera, queen of the gods.
Oh, boy. Hera. Her marriage to Zeus is basically one giant soap opera, filled with jealousy, revenge plots, and constant power struggles.
It makes you wonder, if even gods can't make marriage work, what hope is there for the rest of us?
Well, maybe their problems were just amplified by, being immortal and all-powerful. Speaking of all-powerful, that brings us to Poseidon, the god of the sea.
Poseidon, with his rivalry with Athena, his creation of horses, and his, let's say, active love life, he's not just the god of the sea, he's the god of drama on the high seas.
He does have a bit of a temper, too. Tends to unleash floods when things don't go his way. But then there's Hades, who often gets painted as the villain.
But Riordan gives us a different perspective on Hades, especially through Percy's eyes. We see a god who's powerful, yes, but also lonely and misunderstood. And then there's his love for Persephone. It's a complex relationship, to say the least.
Yeah, Hades isn't just some evil dude lurking in the shadows. He's got depth. And his story, especially with Persephone, is actually kind of tragic. And that's just scratching the surface of the Olympian family drama.
There's still Athena, born from Zeus's head, already armed and ready for battle. Aphrodite, rising from the sea foam, bringing beauty and, let's face it, a whole lot of trouble with her. And then there's Ares, the god of war, who even the other gods find a bit much.
And don't forget about Hephaestus, the blacksmith god. It gets thrown off Mount Olympus. Not once, but twice. Talking about a rough childhood. And then there's Apollo and Artemis, the twins. Apollo, the god of music, poetry, prophecy. He's got it all.
And Artemis, his polar opposite, fierce, independent, the protector of maidens and wild animals. She's definitely not one to mess with.
And of course, we can't forget Hermes, the messenger god. The ultimate trickster, even as a baby. And then there's Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry,
Yeah.
who always seems to be struggling for acceptance.
It's like each Olympian embodies a different aspect of human nature, both the good and the bad.
Exactly. And Riordan does an amazing job of bringing these larger-than-life characters to life, making them feel relatable, even with all their godly powers, and let's be honest, they're often terrible decisions.
It's a reminder that even gods are flawed, that they make mistakes, that they get jealous, angry, and vengeful.
So we've got this cast of characters, this incredibly dysfunctional family dynamic. But what's the bigger picture here? What are some of the key themes that Riordan is exploring through these myths?
Well, one of the most prominent themes is the power of prophecy. We see how prophecies drive the actions of the gods, even if it means making choices that seem kind of dumb in hindsight.
It makes you wonder, do the guys really have free will? Or are they just playing out their predetermined roles in this cosmic drama? And what does that say about us?
Right. Are we bound by fate? Or do we have the power to shape our own destinies? These are questions that have resonated with humans for centuries. And Riordan doesn't give us easy answers, but he makes us think, which is what makes this book so engaging.
Absolutely. And he does it all through the lens of humor, making these ancient stories feel fresh and accessible, even for people who might think they know everything about Greek mythology.
It's like he's saying, hey, these stories are still relevant, they're still funny, they're still tragic, and they still have something to teach us about ourselves.
And that's what makes Percy Jackson's Greek gods such a great deep dive.
Yeah.
It's not just a retelling of old stories. It's a way to reconnect with these myths, to find new meaning in them, and maybe even to learn a thing or two about ourselves along the way.
And on that note, I think it's time for a little break. When we come back, we'll dive even deeper into some of the specific myths and the characters that make them so compelling.
Sounds good to me. We'll be right back after a short break.
All right, let's jump back into the world of Percy Jackson's Greek gods. We were just talking about how Riordan uses humor to make these ancient myths feel relatable, but he doesn't shy away from the darker aspects of the stories either.
That's true. Like,
Right.
remember the whole flood myth? Zeus basically decides to wipe out humanity because they're getting a little too rowdy for his taste. Talk about an overreaction.
It makes you wonder about the relationship between gods and mortals, right? Do the gods really care about humans? Or are we just pawns in their cosmic games?
Yeah, it's almost like the gods are these absentee landlords, occasionally intervening when things get too messy down here. And sometimes their interventions are not exactly helpful.
Exactly. It's like they haven't quite grasped the concept of unintended consequences. But then you have stories like Prometheus, who defies Zeus to give fire to humanity. He's a titan, but he chooses to help humans, even knowing the price he'll pay.
Prometheus is a fascinating character. He's like the ultimate rebel, willing to stand up to the most powerful god for the sake of humanity. It makes you think, where do our loyalties lie? Do we always side with the powerful? Or do we sometimes have to fight for what we believe in, even if it means going against the grain?
That's a powerful message, especially coming from a book aimed at younger readers. Riordan is encouraging them to think critically about authority, to question the status quo.
And he does it in such an entertaining way.
Yeah.
Like, remember when Apollo decides to have a music contest?
Yeah.
With a satyr named Marsyas?
Oh, yeah. Apollo,
Dude.
the god of music, can't stand the thought of being outdone by a mere satyr. Talk about a bruised ego.
The whole scene is hilarious. The muses are judging, terrified of upsetting Apollo, and the stakes are incredibly high. The loser gets slayed alive.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even gods can be incredibly petty and vindictive.
And it's a classic example of hubris, right? Apollo underestimates Marsyas, assuming he'll easily win, but pride often comes before a fall, even for a god.
Speaking of pride, we can't forget Athena's weaving contest with Arachne.
Ah, yes, the ultimate battle of skill and arrogance. Arachne, a talented mortal weaver, boasts that she's even better than Athena, and of course, Athena can't let that stand.
It's interesting how Riordan uses the visual element of weaving to tell the story. He describes these tapestries in such vivid detail, depicting scenes from mythology. It's almost like you can see the stories unfolding before your eyes.
It's like a window into the world of Greek mythology. But it also highlights the power of art, how it can be used to both celebrate and criticize the gods. Arachne's tapestry, while technically brilliant, is full of disrespect for the gods, and it's ultimately what leads to her downfall.
It's a reminder that talent alone isn't enough. You need humility, too, especially when you're dealing with beings as powerful as the gods.
It makes you think about how we interact with power dynamics in our own lives. Are we always respectful of those in authority? Or do we sometimes push back, challenge the rules, and risk the consequences.
It's definitely a theme that resonates throughout these myths. And Riordan does a great job of presenting these complex ideas in a way that's engaging and thought-provoking, even for readers who might not be familiar with Greek mythology.
He invites us to laugh at the gods' follies, to marvel at their power, but also to question their motives and to consider the consequences of their actions. He's not just telling us stories, he's inviting us to think critically about them.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like you're saying, don't just accept these myths at face value. Dig deeper, ask questions, and see what you can learn from them.
And that's what makes Percy Jackson's Greek Gods such a great read. It's entertaining, it's informative, and it challenges us to see the world in new ways.
So we've talked about the humor, the drama, the darker themes. But what about the love stories? Because let's be honest, the gods have some pretty complicated relationships.
Oh, for sure. And Riordan doesn't shy away from depicting love in all its messy, passionate, and sometimes destructive forms. We've got love triangles, forbidden romances, and even love that transcends death.
Yeah, like the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. It's heartbreaking. Orpheus' love for Eurydice is so strong that he journeys to the underworld to bring her back to the land of the living.
It's a classic example of love conquering all, right? Or at least attempting to conquer death itself. But it's also a reminder that sometimes even the greatest love isn't enough.
Orpheus is so close to getting Eurydice back, but his doubt and his inability to follow Hades' instructions lead to her being lost to him forever. It's a powerful story about grief, about loss, but also about the enduring power of love and the lengths we'll go to for those we cherish.
It's a reminder that even in a world filled with gods and monsters, it's the human emotions, the love, the loss, the longing that really resonate with us.
And that's what makes these myths so timeless. They may be thousands of years old, but they still speak to our deepest fears, our hopes, and our desires.
And Riordan, through Percy's voice, makes these stories feel fresh, relevant, and even a little bit funny.
He shows us that even in these fantastical stories, there are echoes of our own human experience. The gods may be immortal, but they grapple with the same emotions we do. Love, jealousy, anger, grief. They make mistakes. They learn from them. Sometimes they just make a giant mess of things.
And that's okay, because isn't that what life is all about? Learning, growing, and figuring things out as we go along. Exactly. And who better to learn from than the gods themselves, even if they do have a tendency to throw lightning bolts when they're having a bad day.
Well, on that note, I think we've just about reached the end of our deep dive into Percy Jackson's Greek gods. It's amazing how these myths, even though they're about gods and monsters, still feel so relevant to our lives.
It's because they tap into those universal themes. Love, loss, betrayal, the struggle for power that we all experience in some form or another.
Exactly. And Riordan's genius is that he makes these themes accessible and engaging, even for readers who might not typically be interested in mythology. He takes these ancient stories and gives them a modern twist, making them funny, relatable, and thought-provoking.
Think about it. The gods may be immortal, but they're still driven by the same desires and insecurities as us mere mortals. They want love. They crave recognition. And they're not afraid to throw a tantrum when they don't get their way.
It's like they're stuck in this eternal high school drama, with all the cliques, the gossip, and the epic battles for popularity.
But it's not just about the laughs. Riordan also uses these myths to explore some pretty profound questions about fate, free will, and the nature of good and evil.
Yeah, like, are we really in control of our own destinies, or are we just playing out roles that were written for us long ago? And what does it mean to be a hero in a world where even the gods are flawed?
Those are questions that philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries. And Riordan doesn't pretend to have all the answers, but he encourages us to think about them, to grapple with the complexities of these myths, and to draw our own conclusions.
And that's what makes Percy Jackson's Greek gods such a rewarding read. It's not just a passive experience. It's an invitation to participate, to engage with these stories, and to find our own meaning in them.
It's like Riordan is saying, hey, these myths are a gift. They're full of wisdom, humor, and inspiration. Don't just take my word for it. Dive in and explore them for yourself.
And that's what we've tried to do in this deep dive. We've scratched the surface of these fascinating stories, but there's so much more to discover.
So, if you're looking for a fresh and engaging way to experience Greek mythology, we highly recommend checking out Percy Jackson's Greek Gods. It's a wild, witty, and thought-provoking ride that will leave you wanting more.
And who knows? You might even learn a thing or two about yourself along the way.
Don't forget to subscribe to Mindful Moments for more deep dives into captivating topics, with new content released every week.
Click the link in the show notes to purchase Percy Jackson's Greek Gods, and you'll be helping us continue to bring you these insightful deep dives.
Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep those minds curious and those moments mindful.